And I really think that all of this, it's like they threw everything at her to try to stop her from exposing all of this information, and she didn't back down. I think it's really what led up to her death. Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Laura Scott, and I'm a trauma-informed life coach and narcissist abuse specialist. So today's topic, what I really wanted to talk about was specifically the royals and narcissistic abuse and how the cycle plays out within their family. So lately I've been watching the series The Crown, and I really, really was fascinated by it because I actually wanted to learn a little bit more about Diana's story. I was pretty young when that whole thing went down, so I really wanted to know what really went on and why the things happened that they did, and what were the events that led up to her death. And as you know, I don't know if any of you watch The Crown. It's about all of the royals. So it starts out with Queen Elizabeth. And I wanted to start out with showing their side of it and what happened with Queen Elizabeth and Philip, and how it actually shows the cycle of abuse within families and how it gets passed down to children and how it repeats, because it's such a good example. All of these things I'm taking a lot of my information from what I watch from The Crown. So a lot of it is a little bit of dramatization of what probably actually happened. I don't know the actual conversations. I don't know what exactly went on behind closed doors, but from watching it, I can come up with a pretty good idea of the cycle of abuse and how it played out within both families. So what I'm going to focus on the most in this video is I'm going to start out with Queen Elizabeth and Philip, and the early years, and then the later years for them. And then I'm going to focus on Charles and Diana and what were the events that led up to her death. So stay tuned, and we're gonna get into it. Let me just check my notes really quick. Okay, so what I first want to go over is the cycle of abuse. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm going to briefly talk about all the different stages in the cycle of abuse. So that way, when we get into it with the actual royals, you'll understand each point. So it starts out with love bombing. And what love bombing is when the narcissist first meets somebody, they usually come across as very charming. You know, you hear the phrase, they were like Prince Charming. And I thought that was kind of perfect for this situation because they are Prince, like they're, royalty. And of course, they come across as these, amazing people. And so really with love bombing, what it really takes to do love bombing is they have to be doing all these grand gestures in order to get something for themselves. So it's not necessarily that they actually care, that they want to really care about this person. They're actually doing it for their own benefit. So the second phase is the devalue phase. So anytime that they go against like the narcissist's wishes, the other person in the relationship, they get devalued. They're smeared, which is another term in narcissistic abuse, which means they get a lot of people to believe a certain story about them. And have you ever heard of smear campaigns with politicians? That's kind of like what narcissists do in this situation. So they devalue them, they discard them, they make everyone kind of like gang up against this person. And it's not always that fun. So the discard phase, the discard phase is sometimes like worse than the devalue phase. Both of them are pretty bad. But in the discard phase, they've realized that they can no longer get to this person. That this person maybe has decided, I'm leaving, I'm ending this relationship, I can no longer tolerate your abuse anymore. And so what they do is they often will disown them, they'll abandon them, they'll do all of these things in order to really like dig their heels in or make this person feel even worse than they already did. So that's, it's none of this is great, but this is where you can get custody battles, degrading their reputation. It often is where some of the smearing campaigns happen as well. They discredit this person to other people so that they can gain something off of it. And then the hoovering phase. The hoovering phase is where once they realize that maybe they think they made a mistake or there's something still there, they think that they can still gain something off of this person, they try to hoover them back in by creating false apologies, pretending that they've changed, maybe actually changing a few behaviors for the short period of time so that the person takes them back and thinks that they're changed, and then they go back right to their old ways. So often this is why it's a cycle, because after the hoovering phase goes right back into sometimes a love bombing, sometimes it skips that phase and then just goes right to like the devalue or discard, and then goes back and forth between that until the person is like finally officially done with this. Okay, so that's a brief example of the cycle of abuse. Let's get into the royals. So what I'm going to start out with is Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. So we're going to use the early years at first, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the love bombing phase with them. So for Queen Elizabeth, she was attracted to Philip. I think that they basically had a little bit of an arrangement, and Queen Elizabeth was allowed at first they didn't actually want Philip, but then she was allowed to be with him. So once that kind of settlement was agreed upon, they got married, and and then after her father died, she then became the queen. And it wasn't really until, I'm still in the love bombing phase, so let's wait for that. The love bombing phase was when it's like, he's a prince. So actually at first let me rephrase this. I think at first Philip was the Duke of, I should have wrote this down, the Duke of Edinburgh, I think. And he then became the prince. So he didn't, gain access and stuff to any royal titles until later on, which in this royal family, I guess because of the way the succession runs, she became queen, and you would think that he would become king off of that, but that's not how the English line is. I'm not sure why, but that's kind of how they do it. So during the love bombing phase, he was doing all these grand gestures to win her approval, and that's normal in any type of relationship. But if you have money and you have lavish things, he was trying to win her over in a big way. So let's move on to the devalue phase. Okay, so during the devalue phase, once she became queen, he realized that she was the one that was in charge, and that he essentially had to bow down to her, Well, this was set in, the 1950s when he felt that, like, in a marriage, the woman should bow down to him. He should have say in a lot of the ways that their children were raised. He should have say in all these different things. And because she was queen, he didn't get that. So he had a very jealous streak. And he was really upset a lot of times when she would take the limelight and he would get pushed aside. And he really didn't have any official duties. He didn't have anything like that was like for him specifically. So, I mean, he had some excursions that he would do, but she really took a lot of the reins. And so he got really jealous of that. And he didn't like that she was not given attention. So I felt like that was very key in the beginning. Um, yeah, he criticized her as a mother and a wife. I'm just checking my notes then. He criticized her not only as a mother, which once she started having children, of course, the queen, doesn't have time always to spend with her children. The children were with nannies a lot. They would go on like 6-month trips and leave the children at home, and that was just considered normal back then, and within the royal family. But he would criticize her and her role, as a parent, as a mother. Um, the discard phase. Okay, so the discard phase with them was very interesting. He started going on these expensive trips with his buddies on this yacht trip around the world, essentially going to all of these different islands. And they made a pact with, they called it the Gentlemen's Club. And it was this group of men that made a pact that anything that happened, they would not talk about. And things that were going on were a lot of these men were sleeping with other women. They were doing all of these things behind their wives' backs. They were, having lavish parties, drinking lots of alcohol, like having just basically like partying on a yacht and like having really, these crazy things. And then they'd come back and, act like nothing had happened. But he was always really distant from her. So like anytime he was back, he didn't, have enough time. He didn't like, and that was kind of the discard phase because he had realized that he couldn't be like in the limelight because she was always going to be that person. And so that really put a damper on a lot of their relationships. And the way that he was cheating, was not great. And it eventually did come out, and they got in some pretty good fights about that. And again, this is all my observations from The Crown, from the show, the series, The Crown. So I don't know exactly the conversations. I don't know, if this is exactly to a T what happened in the royal family. This is just my observations from the series, The Crown. So, okay, and then the Hoovering phase. When she found out about it, he actually, apologized, and he claimed that he would never do this again. At first he didn't apologize, but then eventually he found a way to like apologize because he wanted her back. He wanted the attention. So he claimed he would never do it again. He made up excuses like boys will be boys. So stuff like that, that he would tell her like, oh, well, boys will be boys. We had this fun. And like, it's like, not excusable behavior, what he did. But of course, like he would say that. And then he asked her to make him prince instead of duke. So after all of this, he actually came to her and said, I feel like part of the reason I did this was because I don't have a title. So if you give me a title, then I'll feel better. And it actually worked. She actually made him Prince Charles. So that was kind of, the hoovering phase. She knew, the whole thing about them was, she was the leader of the church, basically. And the church believed you did not get divorced, you did not get separated. No like anything adultery, like, was unheard of and would ruin the royals, would have ruined their reputation. So she knew she had to preserve all of that. So some of this was her strategy. Maybe she didn't quite believe him, but she knew that she had to preserve all of this. And in order to make him happy, she had to do this in order for that to happen. So that was just some of my observations of the early years of Elizabeth and Philip. But the later years, it goes through the same phases. But I feel like, there's a little bit more maturity on their part. There were still excursions, there were still instances where, she felt like Philip was being uh dishonest and or possibly cheating on her, and but they kept on because they didn't believe that there was any possibility of the marriage ending or anything. And later on there was another discard phase, where essentially um sh she, her duties and stuff she had a lot of stuff going on. And anytime that Philip would be around, he would kind of like ignore her. And there were a lot of like instances where she felt neglected. She felt like, she didn't have him to talk to. She didn't have anyone to really go to. So that's kind of like in a nutshell with them. So I really want to get into Prince Charles and Diana now. So, one of the things I will say beforehand was a little bit of signs that you saw in raising, and Philip raising Charles, and how he treated him, and how you can see the abuse starting from a young age. So there's one particular scene where Philip was he told his son that he had to go to this school in Scotland instead of him going to Eden, which was right near where the Queen's Castle. It was right in this, it was right near there. But he wanted him shipped off to this school in Scotland that was a boarding school that had really strict rules, that was almost military like. They had to get up very early, clean, do all of these chores. They had to put them through like physical exertions, and they all kind of had all these duties and stuff to do. And Charles really did not like that. He did not like being there. He didn't want to go there. And so in this one particular episode, Philip had come to actually like give an award because they were doing some sort of like athletic triathlon type thing at the school. And Charles basically he didn't come to the finish line in time. He actually like, lost the race and didn't qualify. And he knew that his father was going to be livid at him, and he almost like kind of like wanted to run away, so they had to kind of look for him. And once they found him, and at first, like, to the public, of course, Philip showed, oh, it's okay, son, you're fine, like, and he was like okay with everything. But then once they got in private, and Philip knew how to fly planes, and he was a pilot, he took him in the plane with him. And I'll never forget the scene in The Crown. It was horrendous. Like, the Philip basically was flying this plane, and Charles was sitting next to him, and he started screaming at Charles saying, you're such a wimp, you're no good, you're weak, this is intolerable, like, you're not, the future king, and you need to set an example, and all of these things. And of course, he was already devastated and he knew his father was going to be upset, and this just like further made him feel insecure, made him feel not good enough, made him feel like inferior, and so on and so forth. And so I really bring up that example because you really start to see the deterioration of, somebody's self-esteem, somebody's worth caused by narcissistic abuse of their parent, then inflicting narcissistic abuse onto other people. So I'm not saying it as an excuse. I'm just saying that this is why this is a cycle. This is why this is a family lineage thing. This is why this happens to a lot of people. So what happened when he, flash forward, he obviously grew up. And when he met Diana, I'm gonna go a little bit beforehand. So like before he met Diana, he was in love with Camilla. But the crown and the royals did not approve of that marriage. For some reason, there was something that was not okay with that marriage, and they disapproved of it, and they forbade him to marry her. And then eventually she moved on. She married somebody else, and he was dating other women. He kind of was seeing a couple people, and he ended up dating the sister of Diana. And Diana was really young at the time. So he met her actually while he was like going on a date with with the sister, because he came to the house and he met her. So that's the first instance of her meeting her. And he really liked her because she was different. She was unique. She actually was very theatrical, which Charles was actually very into theater. He learned in college, he started getting really into Shakespeare and theater and loved that. So Diana also was involved with theater, and she just had this uniqueness, and she was quirky, and he actually liked that at first. He really fell for, her personality, her she was just different, and he liked that. So flash forward, he runs into her again, and they finally arrange a time to meet. So they went on a date. Things went pretty well. It was basically just a courting. It was, chaperoned and all of those things like back in the day that they, wanted to do that. And then the one trip that really changed everything was when he flew her to Scotland, to their castle in Scotland, to meet the family. And it wasn't necessarily because he wanted her to meet the family yet, because they barely knew each other, but it was the only way that he really could get to know her too. And he didn't expect this, but actually the family fell in love with her because she was really outdoorsy, and they liked hunting at the time. And they were looking for this stag. They were looking for this deer that somebody else has shot off of the next property. And they wanted to, it was like a, 10 pointer or whatever. And they wanted this as a trophy to hang on their wall. So they were out looking for this deer. And the one day, Philip actually took Diana out, and he wanted to get to know her. And he took her out hunting, and she was the one who was able to not only spot the deer, but she told him the right direction to look at, to point the gun, because of the way the wind was blowing, and he was able to shoot the deer because of that. So they all kind of fell in love with her. She was really good at party games. She liked to, she was very adventurous. She liked to be outdoors. So they initially actually very much liked her. And that was the moment that she actually said, you need to like commit. You need to like propose to her now. and they had barely like known each other, but it was like, she wanted him to lock it down, essentially. So very soon after that, he proposed, and it was kind of a whirlwind or love bomby like beginning. He sent her on these he sent her these elaborate things. He got her a really expensive engagement ring, and she was all like really excited. And as soon as he proposed, she had to move into the castle. Well, this is when it started. This is when she started to kind of feel really weird about this whole thing. So she was sent to the castle, and she was there for 6 weeks while he was away on a trip. And she barely got to talk to anyone. She basically had to like change her whole life and like move into the castle and um, be on her own. And it was really kind of a trying time for her. She really didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to talk to, and she didn't have a lot of friends. And so she kind of started like, doing some digging to kind of get to know who she was marrying. And in her digging, she found a letter she found some letters that they had sent back and forth, Charles and Camilla. And she knew that they were really close. And she actually had a meeting with Camilla and learned, oh, he talks to me all the time. Like every day. And she found out their nicknames for each other. And then she found 2 days before the wedding, she found a bracelet that he had given Camilla. And it was, she felt devastated. She felt like he really didn't love her. He was like giving this to her. Well, he comes back from his trip and he tells her, no, it's okay. I just gave her that as a friendship bracelet to end things, because she knew that, they had dated at one point, and she accepted that because, he was charming. He said all the right things, and he made her believe that like it was over. Well, it was far from over, because after the wedding, that's when things started really going downhill. So I was kind of in the love bombing phase. So yeah, let me see. He flew her to Scotland, and then he proposed really soon. And that's something that people that are love bombing really do. Not that it was really his choice to do that, but it definitely it definitely was love bombing. Okay, so the devalue phase. So I said about he went away for 6 weeks, and she kind of started feeling weird. And, she found the bracelet. So after the wedding, he barely spent time with her. And she slowly, slipped into a depression, and she started developing an eating disorder. And it was because she really didn't know any of them. She didn't know him. She didn't know, she was alone. She felt isolated. She felt like an outsider. She didn't know how to address the queen, right? And she was like trying to get all these customs right, and she kept like messing up, and she felt really insecure, and she didn't know what to do, and she was like, there's part of perfectionism in her, and I think that's what she developed an eating disorder. And so she so then I wanted to talk about also the devalue phase. She had this for his birthday. She wanted to do something really nice for him. So they went out to an opera, and he was really excited about all of this. And then at the end, she said, oh, I'm gonna go powder my nose. And a couple minutes later, she ended up on stage performing this dance for him. And she wanted to like wow the crowd, and everyone was like applauding, and like she was so excited. And then she went to him afterward, and he berated her. He said, "How dare you take the center of attention on my birthday? You think that that would cheer me up?" And he started yelling at her. And oh my gosh, in my heart, I had a similar experience with my ex, especially around theater. I, those of you who know, I do theater, and I used to be in performances and go to a lot of performances, and took my ex to this play that was one of my favorite plays, and it was actually done by somebody that I that was one of my teachers in high school, that was like one of my mentors, and I was really excited to see this version. And I asked him afterward, like, what did you think? And he said, that was the worst piece of that I ever saw. And it just like my heart just sunk, because like here I was, trying, like, this was something I loved, something I was trying to share with him, and he just berated it, and it was awful. And then the rest of the night was like awful. And it just like, it really, like, in those moments, it's just those, like, taking away something like you love and something that you're trying to share with them, that really stings. So I can understand like how Diana felt in that moment. Okay. So, all right, I'll try to wrap this up a little bit. The discard phase. So after she had William, like, he basically didn't want anything to do with her, and he was continuing to see Camilla in secret, and her eating disorder started becoming worse. And she didn't really reveal this until later in her, actually, she came out with a book on everything that had happened and what she had gone through. um she wanted to commit suicide. She had a couple of suicide attempts and stuff during this phase, and I feel so bad for her, because I can see, like, all the cycle of abuse that's playing out and what she went through. And I also know that I think that she, decided, like, I think this happened for a reason, so that she could expose this within the royal family. She could expose this to the public, because so much information came out and people started really understanding what was going on there. And then there was a hoovering phase. This is like, the early years and stuff for them. So they went on a trip to Australia. This was only when they had William. And they actually had a honeymoon type phase. They called it like their second honeymoon, and it was really lovely. And they actually, like, had a couple really nice moments. He even apologized, and like he said that, like, he wasn't seeing Camilla and all of those things. And of course, like anything, he went right back to his old ways. And after the trip was over, and even before the trip was over, he was kind of acting like a jerk. And, you know, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the later years and what led up to her death as well. So, as you know, after the hoovering phase, then comes they can either go into other love bombing, or it can go into discard, or devalue. So I feel like it was like a devalue phase after that trip. And then she had Harry, and once she had her second son, she was very protective over her children. She felt like she didn't want to neglect them. She didn't want the nannies to be raising them. She wanted to be very close to them. And she knew, it was at this point where she knew that this marriage was not going to work. And so she actually tried for years to separate, but because Charles was going to be king, and he was supposed to represent the church and all it stood for, divorce was not an option at that time. And she basically suffered in silence for years. And some of I wanted to talk about the discard phase, because the smearing and the tactics that were used at this point were just horrible. Later on, as the children got older and as eventually she was able to separate. She finally convinced the queen after years and years and years of like trying. She was able to convince the queen to let her separate. But, she was worried that they would take, because if she moved away and took the kids, they could take the kids because they were royal bloodline and she would have no say over that. So she fought so hard for her kids and she wanted to make sure that she was still going to be in their lives. So that was a huge factor in that. And then she actually got an offer to start writing this book. And the book basically revealed everything that had happened and the cycle of abuse, which they didn't call it narcissistic abuse at the time, but that's essentially what had happened. See what she had gone through, the traumatic things that had happened to her. And she talked about her bulimia and the eating disorder and also the suicide attempts within the book. And the royals caught on somehow, like she was doing this all in secret. She was writing this book and everything was in secret. And basically the way she had it set up was that she was like recording, but she never actually interviewed with the person. So they could never say that she wrote the book, but she essentially wrote the book. And then the royals caught on that this was going to be released, and they were trying everything in their power because this would expose everything. This would expose their family, and that was like the death to the crown. So they decided not to allow this. They decided, like, we're going to try everything to stop this. But the book eventually did come out. And so after it came out, it was like, there were so many things in the family, and then also other members of the family ended up getting separated and or divorced. And it was like Elizabeth felt like it was the house was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do about it because all of the things that she had been told and taught, that these are fundamentals and this is the crown and this is what we do and we do not get divorced. We do not allow this. We do not. Everything was falling apart. And almost every one of the marriages that her children had and her sister had were all falling apart and or they were divorced. And so I feel like I'm not sure exactly what happened, but Diana then there were a lot of things that were almost smear tactics that were happening to her. She would be on the phone line and she'd hear a click, and she felt like somebody was listening in on their conversation. And so she went to them and told them, like, somebody is answering the phone lines, and they said, oh no, our lines are secure, the royals have this line that cannot be penetrated and all of these things. And she said, no, it's still happening. And nobody would believe her. They all called her crazy. This was like so much gaslighting and so much manipulation. And there was a time when her brakes on her car stopped working and she felt like somebody had tampered with them. And of course, like they were like, you're crazy, you're delusional, you're making all this up. And I was just like sitting there, like watching this. I'm like, oh my God, like this poor woman, like, I've been through narcissistic abuse. And of course, they make you look like the crazy person. They were trying to make her, especially to the tabloids and all this stuff, like look like she was insane and that's why this happened. And it wasn't true. It really wasn't true. It was because she was being gaslit and manipulated and all this stuff, but she still pursued on. And up until her death. And I really think that all of this, it's like they threw everything at her to try to stop her from exposing all of this information, and she didn't back down. She was amazing the way that she handled it. And I do see a lot of codependency within her, especially with her children. She was very, very codependent with them, and which is understandable. She was very codependent to the family itself. At one point, when she was young, when she was like lonely and she didn't have anyone, she went to the queen and she said, I just want you to love me. I just want you to care about me. And I was like, oh, my heart, because it was showing such codependency and like her needing outside love and approval for herself and for everything. So of course, this like, smearing and like mislabeling her, she was like, she felt like everyone was against her, and all she wanted was love and approval from the people. And I think some of the people could see it. People still loved her. Like, she was very highly loved, like, and but by her peers and by the crowds and all of that, like whenever she would go to places. But I think it's really what led up to her death. And I mean, I know there's some conspiracies out there, and I won't get like too much into it, but yeah, I do honestly think that somebody, because if you really see the writing on the wall, they tried all the tactics in the book to try to get her to back down, and she wouldn't. And ultimately, like when somebody does that, that's the next step. That's what, I think led to her death. And it's such a shame because you can really see like how it's just the cycle of abuse, and her being different, her being somebody that's a bright light, that's somebody that's shining a light on the darkness, that's showing all this stuff that's happening, that she would be taken down in that way. And yeah, so that's really why I wanted to talk about all of this. I've been so fascinated. I don't know why, like lately, just like about the crown. And I think recently, like in the news right now, you're actually hearing about Prince Charles because he's in the hospital, or he just had an operation. I think he's back yet now. And Kate's also in the hospital, and she's going to be like gone for like, 6 months or something like that, which is unheard of. So there's a lot of talk about some of the royals and stuff right now as well. And after, the Queen's passing and everything. And I just kind of I feel like it's important. I feel like they are a huge symbol of the world's narcissistic abuse controlling power. And what's crumbling right now, that's what's crumbling. It is all of these systems that were built upon narcissistic abuse instead of truly being built upon a good system, something that where somebody really cares and wants to be a leader and show up for the people, to the people, for the people, and is truly there, for the benefit. And I know that sounds like a pipe dream. I know that looking at the state of the world, you say, yeah, it's built upon narcissistic abuse, and there's a lot of it out there. But I really feel like, especially if you look at the royals right now, you can see it crumbling. It's like, that song, like I'll end with this, like, London Bridge is falling down. And I kind of feel like that song is so symbolic for just, the shakeup, the crumbling of the systems that just no longer work, and the narcissistic abuse that is just so prevalent in so much of society. And you see it, and you can really like see it play out when you actually like really study the families of these elites, these like royals, these presidents, these leaders of countries. And that's why I became so fascinated with it. And I hope that you really enjoy this video as well. And remember that, some of the things I said, they might not be 100% accurate. I am following The Crown, the series, not necessarily like doing a lot of deep dive into the actual royals because you can't know the conversations. You can't really like I'm just basing my opinion off of The Crown, and it's just my opinion and take it or leave it. I just wanted to put that out there. So I am really excited to announce that I am very, very close to finishing my certification. So I'm going to be taking on new clients very, very shortly. Just please stay tuned. And I will post a link for the scheduling page if you want to actually schedule now, if you want to schedule a session with me or a clarity session to find out more information about what I do. So I'm a trauma-informed coach specializing in narcissistic abuse. So if you yourself have been through, if any of these points really resonated with you, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I didn't know what Diana went through. Like I went through the same thing. Or if you like related to the, different points of the cycle of abuse, if you can really see that in your life and you're like, I need somebody to like hold my hand and help me through this. If you've gotten out of a relationship, typically I like to take people that have already gotten out of a relationship with an abusive partner because it's easier to really work on the steps and in your own healing. But if you're still, in that relationship, I would encourage you to just like reach out to me and we can see if we'd be a good fit for coaching. So what I do as a trauma-informed coach is I really look at the trauma, the childhood trauma, the different things from your family, from your lineage. We can actually trace back all of these different patterns and protector parts in yourself that are causing you to repeat this pattern. And I myself have been through it too. I know what it's like. I've been through narcissistic abuse and I've gone through all the different steps. I've learned to heal myself from a lot of the trauma. So if you're looking for somebody that can hold your hand through all of this, that's a very scary time. Somebody that Diana did not have at the time. She had almost no one to go to. If you're looking for somebody that can really help you through these times, please consider me as your coach. So I'm going to put the link below to schedule a clarity session where we can kind of get to know each other and we can go from there and see if we'd be a good fit. And then I'm also going to be offering more of my EFT tapping sessions. So EFT tapping is emotional freedom technique, and it uses the meridians of the body to send a calming signal to the brain to help you get out of the fight or flight response. So if you're interested in booking a session where we can go more in depth with it, where we can actually help you pinpoint those problems, please let me know. And as always, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you really like this content, please give me a thumbs up. All right. Well, thank you so much.